when we talk about the integrity and visibility, what we're really speaking about is that it is our responsibility to show up and share our knowledge with other people. We're not necessarily talking about visibility just from let's get famous on social media, or I would like to go viral. And so if that's something you want to learn, you're going to be disappointed in this section, because it's more about the call to leadership when it comes to visibility and why it's so incredibly important. So before we jump into that, of course, I would like the panel to introduce themselves to all of you, and then we'll jump into some questions.
Hello everybody, I'm so happy to be here. I'm Sheri Moise. I am a marketing and planning strategist, and my secret sauce is using strategic data to help my clients connect with their ideal clients, move more ease, to make more money, to get the visibility they're looking for, and as well find out what points towards your success or pushes you away from it.
Hello everybody, I'm Auret Esselen. I'm co-founder of Tolentino and I help experts and thought leaders with YouTube strategy and really positioning yourself on that platform to establish your authority, to attract clients, and also to leverage the most powerful aspect of that platform, which is the search, so that your voice and your thought leadership can be referenced in things like AI and the search as well.
Hey everyone, my name is Tolentino and I am the other co-founder of Tolentino Media. My focus is on the video editing aspect and implementing strategy within that.
And hi everyone again, I'm Carissa Begonia and I'm a LinkedIn strategist. I was actually Jen's LinkedIn strategist for her book launch. That's how we kind of first started working together. And the way I look at LinkedIn and teach LinkedIn is maybe a little bit different from some other marketing agencies in that it's not just about content for me. Yes, content helps you showcase your expertise, but it's more important to be connecting with folks, to having a dialogue with folks, right? That's really what I teach people to do, is how do you find the right people you want to talk to, and how do you actually talk to them, like through the DMs, through the comments, and such.
And in the next section, when we do the training, we're going to talk about the different platforms that matter with your thought leadership, to kind of put the puzzle together. But before we do that, let's talk about your own relationship with visibility. So tell me about your relationship with visibility. What comes up for you? Has there been a sea wave change for you based on the era that's coming up? And so what were kind of your hang-ups around visibility? Because I think everyone has hang-ups around visibility. Am I alone?
Yeah.
I have hang-ups around visibility. I know it doesn't seem like it because I'm in the front of the room, but not just LinkedIn, but ask my YouTube strategists, which these two are, how much trouble they have to wrangle me to speak my knowledge into the tube, okay? So I'd like for you guys, because a lot of times when you become known as an expert or a thought leader, one of the things is people then think, she must be like the bravest person on earth, or enjoys visibility. Maybe you do, so that I also want you to say if you do. But Sheri, let's start with you. What was your relationship with visibility before? What are some of your hang-ups, and what are some of the ways that you get through showing up?
It's been an interesting journey for me with visibility because I spent almost 30 years in corporate sales and marketing, and I was known and an expert there and so comfortable. You get in your zone and you know your audience, And then when I shifted the page and into entrepreneurship, there was so much coming at me. So many people saying, do it this way, this is the right way, this is the way it needs to be. And for the longest time, I just felt so fish out of water. I have no problem sitting up here and speaking in front of people, but it was, don't ask me what I do, because that got me freeze. And here I am, that's someone who, since I was 23 years old, was up in front of groups of, back then, to try to get the attention of 50 food service salesmen. Not fun. But I found myself in this beginner place, of the place of starting over. and trying to find my voice again and my way. And what was really challenging and I struggled with for the longest time is how long it took me to find my way and find my voice, because the thing that I did was I was listening to everyone else and not myself. You know, it's that I knew inside of me how I was wired and designed. I knew what felt real and right for me, yet I was looking for the fastest shortcut I could find, which as a strategist, I like shortest paths to existence, but I couldn't find my way. Astrology was one of the ways that it helped me find my way and gave me permission to just really lean into, you know, what works for me. What are the ways that I can show up and just be me? And when I stopped trying to apologize for not being so polished or not having the right exact words, then I felt like I could be more visible. I could go into a room, because I can tell you for years I lost opportunities with clients and connections and collaborations because I was scared to speak. And so now I say, you know, I'm 56, 70, 57 now. That's possible. And I'm in the fuck it phase of my life.
Yeah, bitch.
Right? And I don't care. I mean, we're meant to repel people as much as we're meant to draw anything. And when I owned that and knew that, then I could just be me. And so I don't need to be everyone in this room's friend. I just need to be me and the right people. And that has been so freeing, but it took till 55, 56 years old to get there.
I think for me, we were talking about being multi-hyphenate earlier, and me, I'm a music artist, I'm a singer, I'm a performer, and what I got really hung up on when I first started creating YouTube videos, and these are educational YouTube videos, that's what we specialize in, is helping you build an educational channel and sharing your expertise. I just couldn't believe that it would be so difficult for me to film videos, given that I perform in front of audiences on stages all the time. And, you know, put me in a music video on stage, like that kind of thing, like I could do that no problem, but when it comes to a camera and staring at the void of a black lens and just speaking and sharing my thoughts, something happens. And for me, it was like getting in my own head. It was like, am I explaining these things properly? Like I want to structure them correctly, right? I have, you know, I want to make sure I'm following the right format and all these things. And in 10 years now, like 10 years of working with other experts, I see the same thing. And it's because we want to show up it's because we all want visibility, but we're afraid of being seen, or, you know, afraid of being seen as messy, afraid of being seen as unprepared, and all of these other things. But the thing is, when we get really in our head about it and like do the script and try to be all polished and perfectly structured and everything, the audience can feel that energy. And that's exactly what we said to Jen too, is like, we don't want you to be on a script. Because when you don't have a script and you just speak from your heart, it's just you can feel a completely different personality, a completely different energy and vibe. And that is what we want people to feel through the videos, because that's resonance. And that's what we optimize for. We want these videos to resonate with the right person. So, you know, for me it was like that journey of like trying to film videos in many different ways, bullet points, scripts, no scripts, like just trying to figure it out and realizing I don't care if it's messy. I don't care if like I mess up, because that can all be fixed in the editing, honestly. Like a lot can be fixed in the edit. You just cut out all of those mistakes and it looks great. So, you know, it's just show up with just you, just be yourself, know your shit, and do the work. And you know, that's just gonna emulate and that's gonna attract other people to you.
One thing I noticed in the beginning of our YouTube journey was that, you know, there were all these really popular channels, and after a couple of years, there would always be the I'm leaving YouTube video. Like I'm burnt out, I'm leaving, and I would watch every single one of those videos and I would notice a pattern. the pattern was they went all in on the channel, they spoke about one thing, they boxed themselves in, and now they can't talk about anything else, so now they hate their channel and they want to leave it and do something else. I watched so many of those videos and I took all that information and I was like, I don't want that to be us. So I want to talk about what I want to talk about on our channel, while still also, having it be searchable as well for everybody else. And so we took the road less traveled back in 2015, and at the time everybody's like, oh, you're doing YouTube wrong, you're not going viral, you're not doing the only one niche, you gotta talk about one thing. But now the narrative has changed, and everybody's like, oh, you don't need all the views, you don't need to go viral, you can actually get really quality clients and leads from a very small amount of views. So it's funny that we've been saying this since 2015 and 16, and now it's like, that's the narrative now. And honestly, with starting YouTube, I was the shy kid in school. I was the one that, if you asked me a question, I would get a stomachache and I would want to go to the washroom. And I just wanted to hide in the washroom, even though I knew the answer. And so it's very funny that I'm sitting up here now because I was that kid in high school. And we're actually best friends from high school. So we've known each other since we were 12, 13 years old. And so it's really just a muscle. Doing videos, it's like going to the gym. How do you get muscles? You just keep lifting that weight over and over again. And it's the same thing with videos. And so I had to put in my reps. We have over 2,500 how-to tutorials on our channel now. It's just work muscle over and over again. So that's kind of how we got over that. But yeah, a good tip for everybody.
So for visibility for me, I've always been the precocious child, and I'm an extrovert, so I don't have trouble with visibility. But the problem with visibility is that the more you become seen, you can get people who resonate with you, who want to follow you and be your friends, and you also get haters. And I feel like I've had a lot of circumstances because my previous work before becoming an entrepreneur, my last corporate role was the head of D&I, diversity and inclusion at Zappos. And that role, right, anyone who does that kind of work, people hate you, they love you. There's kind of a little bit in between, but it is a polarizing job. And when I think I've been the person in my entire life that's always sticking up and looking for justice for folks, right? And when others don't want to speak up, I will. I just can't help myself. And that translated, and so I've been punished, whether that was in my personal life, whether that's been in corporate America, I've been punished for it, for asking too many questions, for saying too many things. And what I found on LinkedIn, actually one of my jobs, I was reprimanded for speaking about justice and rights and equality particularly for racialized folks. And I was pulled in to HR and told, we can't talk about that. I'm like, excuse me? It's my personal Facebook. So I made a decision that I'm going to go onto LinkedIn and double down on talking about issues. And so when LinkedIn to me, because it was more professional, right? That there is actually some more decorum on LinkedIn. People's profiles are attached to their jobs. So there is a little bit more hesitation to just wild out on there than other meta, say. So I found that I was actually rewarded on LinkedIn for speaking my mind, for standing up. In particular, I started speaking up on the platform in 2020. So 2020 was the pandemic. It was also time for when a lot of Asian Americans were experiencing anti-Asian hate. And I, at the time, started, mouthing off on, this is an experience from myself as an Asian professional, Asian woman, also a woman in DEI. It was funny because a lot of even in the diversity and inclusion industry, there weren't a lot of folks who looked like me that people were seeing, and on LinkedIn, right? And so that kind of combination is you're not seeing a lot of me, I'm starting to share opinions, and the flood of messages that I got that were thank you for saying the things I want to say, for speaking up loud. I think that has been the benefit of sharing my stories, sharing what's important. We were talking about stories, right? And why that's really what connects us in terms of authority and relatability. And so that's what I was rewarded and found. And Additionally, I was rewarded, it became a 2023, I was given a LinkedIn Top Voice badge because I was just myself and being honest about my experience. And that is my advice for anyone, that even when you are nervous and maybe not as vocal, when you can center yourself on what those values are, what's important about your convictions, that's what brings the confidence to show up in any space, whether that's on social media or in person.
I love that. And I think that I want to say the good news about visibility is that people will know more of your work. The bad news about visibility is haters, trolls, jerks will know about your work. That's the cost of visibility. But you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Are your values, are your frameworks, are your stories, is your wisdom worth the cost? And there's really not a good or bad answer, it's a decision, right? And for those of you that are navigating what Carissa just mentioned, where it's like, I am concerned about being myself because it could threaten my job or whatever, that's why you have to be strategic. I said earlier that transparency and authenticity are not the same thing. They are not synonyms. You use authenticity in a potent way when you're strategic about landing it, right? So let's talk about strategy, because what do you choose to share and what don't you share? Because Sheri, I heard you say, when you decided to go inwards and really listen to yourself, which I love, because again, first rule of thought leadership, be yourself, right? Second rule, know your shit. Third rule is the do the work part, and the do the work part sometimes gets convoluted because you think, okay, that means I should say everything. And I want to open that up so they understand, how do you determine what's to share, what's not to share, or not to share right now? How do you make those decisions?
I'm not the person you're gonna find on Instagram sharing my entire life, like the daily doings. Funny enough, I'll think in my head, I can make a reel about this, but I'm not an Instagram girl, that's not where I land and live. But if you're on my email list, you're gonna know about my grandmother. You're gonna know about just pieces of my life. I don't talk about my stepsons as much in my emails. I've chosen pieces. My sweet dog is still here. I chose things that inspire my work. Why do I do this work in the world? I'm getting choked up. My granddaughter is why I do this work in the world. Because I want her to know what it looks like, feels like to put yourself out there, to be yourself, to show up. And so she inspires me every day. So I talk about her, and I talk about the things, but I do not share my whole life. I don't talk about my husband very often, or my relationships. Sometimes I will if I feel like, and I don't. There's a lot of grow marketers out there that, they'll leverage a story to get you hooked in. And I don't want to do that. I'm not always trying to tie my story to a business lesson. I'm doing it because it feels right. And I also know myself and I know my audience. I know that I am meant to be seen through my actions. That's how people connect with me. I know how I'm wired. And I know that if I share a little bit about me with you, and you see me doing the work that I'm suggesting you do, you're my people. So it's also, how do you meet your people where they're at? But it has to feel right. And there was a time when I was told, this is the framework, this is how you do it, and it didn't feel right. And so I had to find my layer that felt like, okay, this is me, it feels authentic, I'm not trying to pimp my granddaughter out in any way, shape, or form. It's not like that. Every email isn't about her, every post isn't, but in the right moments, when it's something that hits my heart, that helps me and might help someone else move their business forward or their life forward, that's when I get more personal. And because I think and again, to know your audience, to know who you're talking to, whether you're, in corporate or not, we're all speaking, right? We're all sharing with our community, with our colleagues. I was always the one in corporate who spoke up in the room. Sheri would take the heat, right? Sheri could talk to the boss. But it was also my approach. It was how I was received and what I was known for to do. So it still comes back to do you, right? It still comes back to what feels right for you. And if it doesn't, don't share it.
I think about it in terms of like how, you know, if you're meeting face to face with someone and you're having a conversation, like there's an energy exchange, right? And so, you know, someone will say something, share a story, and you'll comment on it, or maybe say something that relates to your experience. And so, but it's like around a particular topic. And so when I think about, you know, specifically talking about YouTube, if you're creating content on a specific topic, then the thinking that behind that is, what is a story I can share, or what is a lived experience I can share, or what is a data point that I can share, you know, that contributes to what I want someone to take away from this video. Because for me, I'm very outcome based. Like, what's the goal here? What is? I mean, if you don't know why you're on YouTube, you shouldn't be on YouTube. You need to know why you're even doing this. It's a vehicle for something. How does it support your mission? How does it support what you're already doing? And so you need to start there. Like, what do I want from this platform? And from that, you can create pieces of content that serve, or like little, you know, army men or whatever. That was wrong. Like, but just like they're serving. I like to think of it as like separate sales and marketing people on your team. Like, every video is a team member. It's a clone of you. It is speaking to your thought, your passion. It is, you know, bringing people into your world. It is marketing your brand. It is inviting people into a conversation, inviting people into an email list. Again, it's like, what do you want to achieve? And so I'm always thinking in terms of what to share, going back to the question, I'm always thinking of, does this serve the purpose of this video?
So how I've approached YouTube and what to share is, how I've always gotten over it is, I want to speak to you like you're my friend, because that's how I want to be spoken to and how I want to be taught. So if you've ever watched any of my tutorial videos, it's like how I am in real life with people. I'm very friendly. I will share everything with the tutorial. I'll go step by step. And it's funny because when people meet me in real life after watching our tutorial videos, they're like, "You're exactly like your videos." And I'm like, "Hi, I would hope I would be." I think I take that as a compliment. And you know, there are people who act as characters on YouTube especially, and they're completely different in real life, and you're kind of like shocked, and it's not what you expected. So I don't want that. So I show up as who I am, as a friend, how I would like to be spoken to, and so that's how I share. Now, if you go on my Instagram, it's a lot more silly and fun. I do have this fun, silly personality when you get to know me. So I put that kind of stuff on Instagram, but on YouTube, it's very like friendly tutorials, teaching. I'm gonna guide you. I'm your friend. I'm here for you, and so that's how I've approached it.
What I'll share is my experience with working with clients is that there's sometimes this binary that I either have to overly share. I don't want to share all about my life and all the little things about going to like put what I'm going to wear today and where I'm going. And then there's this other side of feeling like, okay, I only have to talk about work. There's a balance. So I'm a strategist too, like Jen, right? And it's not one or the other. And I think sometimes we can over-index, and particularly find this with my women clients who are wanting to over-index on the personal stories. People do need to know that that's how we relate to each other, 100%. And on the other end, what ends up happening is we don't share the work, right? Because you can put them together, as Jen was sharing earlier, right? Like you can tell the stories and how it relates back to your frameworks. But what the myth sometimes I see about sharing is that, again, we're saying, here's like these personal stories that do connect, but we don't understand about your work, right? And so what I invite people to think about is, how do you combine both? and make sure that when you are sharing content, that it's not just about everything that's going on in your life, as much as you feel comfortable sharing, right? That's always the given, that's the baseline. Do not share things that you are not comfortable sharing. No, why would you do that, right? On the other hand, though, don't be shy about sharing the work you do, the frameworks that you have, all the clients you work with, and bragging on yourself, frankly. I know that some people will say with LinkedIn, it's like, wow, we're so tired of hearing that. I'm so honored to be invited to speak here and do that thing, right? Like, yes, I get it. And brag on yourself, because people want to see you shine, right? People need to know. To me, in DI, it's about representation. That's a large part of why I still kind of show up, because I also, as much as, yes, you've given me a top voice and all that, thank you, I don't love creating content myself, right? And the easiest time it was when it was just flowing. So we can get overly strategic about it. Again, really it's about finding that balance, trying to figure out what is that consistency, and then showcasing both. Again, the smarts, all the good stuff that you have to share that you know you can teach people, and then again, relatable stories that make it real for folks.
One of the general themes that has been woven in Out today is being multi-hyphenate. And so oftentimes we find ourselves where we're in a job, working for someone, but we're also building our thought leadership and our personal brands alongside of our 9-to-5s, which is a good thing. See your job as your investor until you no longer have to be invested by your job. So what I would love for a couple of you to speak to is when it comes to visibility, when you actually have a job, but you're building thought leadership in another area, how do you tread lightly, or what is the way to be strategic about visibility of what it is you're going alongside your 9-to-5, especially if it doesn't align or support what it is that you're being hired to do?
Carissa and I have this lived experience. I knew that I was going to leave corporate when my boys were done with high school. That was an agreement my husband and I had. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew that my job had become soul-sucking, and I needed to do something that lit me up. So I started doing what any strategist would do a year before. I am trying to figure out how to build a business. I want to do all the things right. I want to have all the plan. And that meant starting to talk about what I was thinking about doing. At that time, I would call what I was doing more like coaching. I'm also a heart-mouth master trainer for those who emotional self-resilience. And so I was building programs and doing some work with nurses and things like that. And I had such fear initially around being found out by my boss. And it was an interesting, so I didn't go all in, all out in the world. Now back then, it wasn't the same kind of social media energy that there is today. Your boss didn't go and check you out on the regular, but people found out that I was doing presentations, that I was building a program for XYZ. And, I just, at that time, it was like, this is my heart. This is my work outside of work. And I want to share it because I think it's important. So I knew I didn't say my exiting stage left in a year, which I knew I was going to do. But I knew that if the conversation came up, two things. One, I knew where my values stood, and I knew what I was doing and why. And two, if it meant it was time to go, then the universe would push me out the door faster, and I could live with that too. So I was conscious. I think the key was just being a conscious creator and choosing to know my audience and know the world that I was living in, and I wasn't over LinkedIn all the time where I knew my colleagues were as much, but I was sharing information about things I cared about, which I also have to be working on at the same time.
So I get this question a lot with LinkedIn in particular, because there are folks who are looking for jobs or still are in a job, and so they want their profile to reflect that. While alongside, creating their business on the side, or really starting to develop their thought leadership. And so very practically what I can say about that is, one, you can start a business account too, right? And if you need to in the beginning, if you really truly need to have your profile be about your job, well, actually start there. I would question that because I think there's a lot of folks who are worried about that unnecessarily. And it's a real fear. Listen, I've been punished in corporate America too. So I think the first thing is, do you have a relationship with your workplace to be able to say, to ask even, is there an issue here? You know, instead of guessing or assuming that there is. Right now, right, I think maybe even 5 years ago it wasn't as acceptable, but now like businesses are built off of those CEOs, the executive team's personal brands. So it might be okay to share more often that who are you about? What do you do? What is the work you bring to the world, right? So I would very practically ask them if you can. Now, you sometimes cannot, and so that's where I say you can use your business account even though it's not going to be as useful, kind of like Instagram as well. People want to see you as you, they want to connect with you, right? But if you have to, I would say then use that as an account and you can start putting your stuff there. And listen, if you don't need to be friends with some of the people that you're working with, don't connect with them. You don't have to actually accept that, right? So there's some ways to have both presented to the world on a platform. Now for omnichannel, that's another decision you can make is not everything has to go on every platform. So maybe you are on YouTube and talking about your thought leadership there. And LinkedIn is reserved for your current work, your current career. That's another way you can kind of practically get around sharing your stuff. So this is why it's important to have strategy and work with a bunch of folks because it's not the same for everybody. Their circumstances are different, but I wouldn't let that be a barrier, if you will, to not putting your work out there. That let's find a way to and maybe what platform it needs to be on that might make the most sense.
So I wasn't strategic. I worked at an insurance company, and when I started our business, I just went full all in, and I used the company's hours, and I wasn't working on the actual job that I was supposed to be there for, and so I got fired, and I took that as a sign from the universe and was literally dropped into the deep end, and this was in 2009, and I said, okay, I didn't really want to do that job anyways. It was insurance, and it was very boring for me, as I am a multi-passionate creative. And I took that as a sign from the universe, and I just went all in. I was like, okay, I've been dropped off here, I'm gonna make this work, and I've not gone back. So that was 2009, and yeah, sometimes life is just funny like that.
If there's someone in the room that has been visible for one topic, and they now have discovered that they want to begin to develop thought leadership in a topic that is completely not related at all, how do you recommend that they begin to shift from what it is that they've been known for into what it is that they're becoming known for without looking all over the place or scattered, or some of the reservations that we may have about how we shift our thought leadership from one arena to another?
Well, being that I pivoted 3 times in 8 years, slight pivots. The first one was the biggest pivot. Then I went into business coaching, and then 3 years ago, planted my flag in the ground and said the astro-strategic portion of astrology matters for my people, for what I want to do. And especially because astrology is something people think of, as woo, or not as pseudoscience, or not as all the things. And so at first, I hid it. And so that transition of, okay, I'm just gonna go for it because a business coach is, more legit. And so, but then my clients in my world who knew were like, why are you talking about this? Like, this is so powerful. It's moving our business forward in a way that was not happening before. And so I had to reconcile within myself to be able to say, because I don't do something that's true. Yes, there's a lot of tradition in me. I'm multi-hyphenated as well. I'm the strategist, the astrologer, the intuitive. You work with me, you're going to get all of it. But I had to figure out how to own it, and then I could show up and be visible and start sharing about it. And I found when I did start talking about it, at first it was in groups, because I needed to gain confidence. that people weren't going to just, you're crazy. Like, what are you talking about? That's, and once I gained some confidence and I could figure out how to speak about it in a way that felt good to me, then I started putting content out there and I was more direct. But it took me time to make that pivot. And that was, for me in my case, it was a bit more internal, which often it is, right? We tell ourselves stories all day long about what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. And I thought, I'm not legit if I talk about this. But I'm not doing a service to my potential current or future clients if I don't give you the full breadth of who I am, what I'm about, and what my gifts can bring to you, your life, or your business. So then I decided to get the heck out of my own way and really start sharing. But it's been an evolution of shifting how I see myself so that I could show up and be. I think the word authentic gets thrown around a lot, and I think it's hard to reconcile that. Like, what does that even mean? To be your authentic self. And I was spoken about earlier on the panel, about just, does it feel right to you? It didn't feel right to me to be hiding things. And so when I did start sharing, I got more bold and more in my own body and more feeling like myself. And that's when I knew I landed the plane finally. And we're still flying it. I still maybe just got my pilot's license in some ways. But that was my journey.
You heard Jill talk about earlier, we took the road less traveled with our YouTube channel because we're human beings that evolve in so many different ways, and we went through so many different shifts in our business, and we knew right from the beginning that we did not want to be pigeonholed into one topic, because that's just not who we are. And there's not going to be a point to starting a channel about one particular topic if we can't passionately talk about that thing over and over again for the next 5 years. And you gotta think like that. You gotta think long game, because that's how you show up. That's your commitment to showing up over and over again. And so when we first started our YouTube channel, our entire business was called Esselen Artists rather than Esselen Media, because we cater to creative entrepreneurs, and we were releasing videos on how to build your artist website and how to design graphic banners for your Facebook page back in the day when your Facebook profile was like vertical. It's horizontal now, the banner part. So there's so many different things. And then we talked about Etsy, growing your Etsy store, and then fast forward to now where we're talking about YouTube strategy for experts and educators and thought leaders. And so all of that lived, it still does, on the same channel. And we changed the channel now, of course, into Tolentino Media. But it lives under this umbrella of, creating profitable content, and it comes from a place of our values. Like, that's the common ground. Like, one of our biggest values is self-expression. And so, that can be expressed in many different ways and in different avenues. And so, we have this common ground of creating content around who you are, and there's many different colors of that. And I think building a platform, at least on YouTube, around your personal brand, if you can find a common ground like that, an umbrella to kind of keep it all under, for example, for us, it was content marketing, right? Then it's more forgiving because, again, you're showing up as you, as your personal brand. And if people resonate with you from a video, they'll come along with you on the journey. And yes, the algorithm may, reprimand you, punish that, but that's okay, because, back in the day, all the YouTube gurus were being like, you're doing anything wrong, you should be creating a separate channel for that. And I'm like, no, we don't want to, because we're not gonna, that's just gonna, die, within a year. So I think it's important to just think about that, think about that choice and that decision of, do you see yourself doing you as a personal brand, and would you want to create a platform under your personal brand in that way, so that you can talk about multiple things, and just know when you are doing that, You are going the longer route, the slower route. I'm not gonna lie to you. But if you are here to play a long game and you're on a mission and, you're committed to that mission, then you're partners with YouTube, and that's going to be a juicy partnership because it's a search engine and it's going to do well, especially in the age of AI, and we'll keep referencing you.
I have a question for everyone. I'm just curious. Are you all building brands publicly? A lot of insurance. Trying to, yeah. Great, try it, great. Two things. One, what I see people try to do, sometimes they'll go onto a platform, when I'm working with folks on LinkedIn, and they want to know how do you do this technically. And I'm like, I can teach you technically how to actually, you can just ask AI to do it, to tell you, right? Watch a YouTube channel, like that's the easy part. The hard part about going onto any platform, doesn't matter if it's LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever, is your messaging. So Jen talked about our unique message model, right? Because you need to know that first. So you were talking about like having multiple frameworks or multiple ideas, multiple approaches or stories and such, but they seem disparate. They don't seem like they're connected at all. And I'm curious if they actually do connect, and maybe you don't see the connection because you're so deep in that work, like someone else can, or based on our different authorities or our different skill sets, some of us are really good at connecting the dots, as a good strategists are really good at that. And so I would spend time, one, on what is the message you're trying to put together in the first place, and if you need to work with a strategist on that, do that. At the same time, I also believe in testing and trying, because as good as your strategy can be with your message, you don't really know if it's going to resonate unless you put it out there. So I've also had the opposite of people being like, okay, I got the strategy, let's go. I'm like, you've been sitting on the strategy that I gave you for like months, what's up, right? Let's put it out there and see if it's actually working, resonating, because that feedback will tell us, we gotta tweak some words. It's not what we thought was really solid, actually isn't landing. And that's the thing about, for marketers in the room, marketing is a constant test. Try, test it, reiterate, right? And so that's my invitation is, again, have a strategy, but know what message you want to put out there, really start with who you want to speak to. And then also, don't be afraid to just do it sloppily, try it, and see what happens, and get that feedback.
Awesome. Well, thank you to the panel, and I will turn it back over to Jen.